Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Guys on Sports. Week 3 is in the books. Rocky, how you doing?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Ready for our show.
So, did Week 3 mean big dubs for you this week, or are you in the dungeon?
No, I am. So I'm in 5 leagues, and I am 3-2. But
Humble brag.
Yeah. Well, I keep losing in the leagues I really care about.
Okay.
So that's the issue. Is in my league of record, I lost
To me, but I lost to you in my league.
Yeah. So it's tit for tat there.
I will say, if it weren't for some knucklehead decisions on my part, we both scored pretty badly across the board. But I think that goes into what we're saying. I think passing across the league, offense across the league is just down. It's a down year. I think opening week they said total passing or touchdowns scored was down in the 60s or low 70s versus over 100 a couple of seasons ago.
Yeah, I think through week 3, it's something like 189 to this year, it's like right over 110. So it's down appreciably, about 40-something%.
Yeah.
Teams are having trouble scoring, and I think it's the defenses are catching up.
I was thinking the same thing. I don't think people are talking about it enough yet, but there's always those periods where the defense kind of figures out the schemes that the offenses are running and guys have to adjust. But one thing you don't have to do and what you don't have to adjust to is losing every week in your league. And there's an easy way to remedy that. That's by going to our Patreon. The link is going to be in the bio. Go to our Patreon. You can sign up. Be one of the guys. We will give you Rocky's cheat sheets. We will give you my best bets. We will give you Mark start sits. And the most important thing is if you hit our top tier, you get one-on-one, mano-a-mano advice from us an hour before kickoff. That's every time there's a game. That's a Thursday night, that's a Sunday, and that's a Monday night. So that means we can tell you who to start, who to sit, if you trust us to do so. But check us out on Patreon, and let's give a shout-out to our guys, CHALKBOARD. CHALKBOARD is a 24/7 free fantasy advice from us. Now, we're going to give you more on Patreon, but you will get tidbits on CHALKBOARD. So just follow the link in our bio or the QR code that you're going to see on screen here. One of the best things about our CHALKBOARD is our Discord with over 300 members that we've cultivated. And I'll tell you what, these guys in there, they care about fantasy, and they're going to be able to give you some good advice as well. So when you go there, you will get tidbits of Mark Start Sits. Basically, just kind of a teaser there, and we'll bring you to the Patreon to give you the full meal. Rocky, you like CHALKBOARD? How's it going for you?
Yeah, I do, and the best thing about CHALKBOARD is you can ask your questions before the game on Thursday or anytime before the games on Sunday, Monday night. Somebody will interact. We'll talk through. You can show us your rosters. We'll try to help you, although you really need to kind of give us some background information, what type of league is it is, PPR, et cetera. But, yeah, CHALKBOARD is a great community, very vibrant. And sometimes if we don't answer, somebody else within the chat will.
Yeah, it's a healthy community, very robust, as some might say. So, without further ado, we're going to talk about Week 3. We're going to wrap up Week 3, and we're going to call this segment, That's a Wrap. It's a little bit of a double entendre there. So, what we're doing is we're just going to point out some guys that may or may not have been talked about a bunch in the offseason that are floundering a little bit. And we're just going to say whether or not we think it's a wrap for them.
Yeah.
Or if there's somebody you can hold on to. And we may talk about some other names here and there. But that's why it's super important for you guys to get in the comments, ask questions, go to the Patreon, ask questions, where you could get like those more specific questions answered. And the more you guys do that, the more episodes we can do to help you guys out. So we'll start with the QB room. There's quite a few guys that have disappointed, but none other than the big money man who we just seen a night ago, Mr. Trevor Lawrence, Pegasus himself.
Yeah.
It hasn't been pretty. Rocky, I'm going to ask you, since you had some time to look, what you think about him. I want to pull up his stats while you're talking, and I want to get an idea of what we're dealing with here. But
well, I think it's, Trevor is an interesting quarterback. And I've watched him live against the Browns, and he does have all the necessary skill sets. He's a good runner, strong arm. His weakness is he makes boneheaded decisions at the wrong time. On a strictly NFL level, he's lost 8 straight games, which is a big deal. And again, against Buffalo, made some real boneheaded decisions. Now, they were playing from behind. Buffalo definitely looks like the class maybe of the NFL right now. But, it's worrying, very worrying, because I think he's got decent receivers. I like his running back room, and he still seems to struggle in decisions.
Yeah, Trevor Lawrence. So, I mean, here's what's scary. Like, what you said is true. Trevor Lawrence at times has displayed the arm talent, the ability to make throws, and all that jazz. But the losing record is concerning for sure. But for fantasy purposes, I mean, we're talking about a guy here through the first 3 weeks who has thrown for a total of under 600 yards, 2 touchdowns to 1 interception. This is a guy that was given a big contract.
Yeah.
They've invested in the playmakers around him, and it just hasn't bore fruit. I mean, coming into the season, I was down on him.
Yeah.
We even talked about a trade that was made in one of our leagues, and that he was, I think you might have been you trying to trade him.
Which I did. I traded him.
Yeah, you did. But he was, I mean, by a bunch of guys that we follow, shout out to Fantasy Pros, his ADP was pretty high. Said he was worth that in the trade evaluator. But it just hasn't, it doesn't seem like it. And while we've seen flashes, we've also seen very inconsistent play.
Yeah.
And listen, I'm a Giants fan. I'm always going to bring it back to a guy that gets ridiculed, Daniel Jones, that if you bring these guys' numbers side to side, they're almost identical. And one of them is making $15 million more a year, has had consistently better weapons up until now. But I just think that when you're evaluating your talent and the guys you're trying to pick for your team, look beyond the hype and kind of dig into the numbers, because, you know, the media with these guys kind of runs with them, and then you think Trevor Lawrence is the stud quarterback and you put him on your team, and he's now ranked in the 20s for quarterbacks.
And I don't think
great.
I traded him before the season started in the 2 leagues where I had him, because he was a big name signed to a big contract with decent players around him. But I just had a feeling that he's inconsistent. And he has, like 2 years ago, had a stretch where he was like the number 3 quarterback for 9 games straight.
Yeah.
But the other half of the season, he was an absolute wreck. And he's starting very poorly. Very, very poorly.
Very poorly. So what do you think? Projections going forward? Is it a wrap? Is it not?
So I don't think it's a wrap. I do think part of it is scheming, and I'm not so sure that they're putting him in the right, place to win. I can tell you this much, as a Browns fan.
Yeah.
If they approached the Browns straight up, wanted to trade T-Law for Deshaun Watson, I'd do it without even blinking.
All right, so I don't even want to cut you off, but I'm going to cut you off, because the question I'm really asking, and I'm going to ask you this a bunch of times, so I want you to get what I'm saying. Are you trading for him right now, or are you trying to get rid of him?
No. I'm not in fantasy football. I'm not trading for him.
All right, so when I pose that to you, these next guys, that's what I'm. Right now, you putting your chips on trading a draft pick for him, or you trading him for a draft pick in a dynasty, right?
Yep.
So, okay. So I'm the same. I just don't think. I think yes, he can be better. He definitely could be better. We've seen it. And yes, he's probably a good pickup for a team that needs a quarterback. But on your fantasy team this season, I don't see any upside. If you get a pick from him or something from him, I think you do it. All right, moving on. Justin Herbert, another favorite of our show, has struggled. And I don't know whether we can put it all on him, if it's a product of the wide receiver core, even though Quentin Johnson seems to be coming around, or if it's the game plan. Now, he's hurt. He's banged up. Not sure he should have played this week.
Yeah.
I think it was a little bit of, I don't know what to call it, but it was mismanagement on the part of Mr. Harbaugh there. I think he let him sit and wait for the big KC matchup this week. So I don't love that, but I'll run through some stats here. I think the most alarming is through 3 games, the highest attempt total he's had is 26. It's just not going to get it done, especially for a guy that I paid $135 for. I benched him this week, and rightfully so. I'm glad I made that move, but he just hasn't really looked great. We're talking about 10.4 points, 12 points, 9 points. What are you seeing with Herbert?
I mean, so what I do like is, 66% completion rate, 67%. He's completing the passes that he's being asked to throw. The issue could be Harbaugh. Harbaugh likes that ball control offense. He's going to run the ball a lot, and when he does pass, he's passing as if it's a running game. So from a fantasy standpoint, I think it could be a disastrous year, but I don't think the talent's not there.
Yeah, I think talent is there with Herbert. And what's funny is that we spoke at length about this in the offseason, just saying, hey, there's a chance. Yeah. We like Air Bear, but there's a chance that Herbert shows up because, Harbaugh just has a style that he likes to play.
That's right. Yep.
And, on the football side, I think long term, this is probably great for them because I do think in the playoffs, he's going to allow him to throw the ball and all that stuff, but they're trying to establish an identity. So, for me, this season, if you can get out from under Justin contract's $135 contract, I would.
Yeah, and in your league, and it's interesting because Phil's league of record is a 2-quarterback league.
Flex,
yeah. So he actually, in that league, you might have an option to get rid of him. Because,
I might, yeah.
But in a lot of leagues, you're probably not. If it's a 1-quarterback league, people are going to sit off. But, again, if you get him cheap, and you need a second quarterback.
If you're in a redraft, it just depends on the type of league you're in. But I'd say, if he was your quarterback that you drafted to be your one,
you're probably pretty upset.
You're upset, and then but there's a lot of guys that are producing that I'm sure we'll get into later. But it's looking tough for Herbert. So you wouldn't trade for him right now, right? I'm assuming.
No, I would not trade for him.
Okie dokie. All right, moving on to the running back room now. I'm going to start with a guy that's near and dear to our friend's heart. He's not here today because he has more important things to do. We love you, Mark. But DeAndre Swift, who Mark told me last week, sitting in that seat, was going to turn it around. Said the line hasn't been blocking well. This, that, and the third. And, I believe that Swift's on one of my teams too.
Yep.
But, man, the average per, I don't know if you have it pulled up there, Rocky, do you?
I'm looking for it now. I haven't pulled it up.
Okay, I'll get that pulled up. If you don't have it, let me get to it. DeAndre Swift. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but the average per right now is pretty abysmal.
Yeah, 1.8.
Yeah.
68 yards. And that's in 3 games.
Lose a lot of snaps to Rashawn.
So this is what I'm looking at. He's got 37 carries compared to 8 for Rashawn Johnson, and 8 from Khalil Herbert. So there is a little bit of a timeshare going on. But unlike the others, and I'm sure you're going to ask this question, if I'm in the right league and I'm hurting for a running back with upside, I might make this trade. I might trade for Swift because I do think by the end of the year, they're going to figure something out. Caleb is getting a little bit better with each game. Not great, but he's getting better. And I do think that there's a possibility Swift works into a functioning running back, 2 maybe.
So this is a guy you trade for.
This is a guy that I would be interested because I think you get him cheap, and running backs are,
valuable.
Valuable.
Especially in this new rushing league.
Yep.
So conversely, I would say a guy like me who owns him, I'm holding him.
Yep.
Because his value is just not there. He's more valuable staying on my roster, right?
He's worth it. And if you maybe pick the right matchups, or if they continue to get him moved into the receiving, could be a really big win.
All right. So DeAndre Swift, on to our next runner, is another guy we argued and talked about a bunch in the offseason. I'll let you do the honors. You want to bring him up?
Yeah, and so right now we're going to be talking about Rachaad White, and I have not been a fan of Rachaad White as a runner. What I have consistently said is that he is a great receiver, and that is bearing out. 3 games in, he has 12 receptions already, 13 targets, but no touchdowns. He is averaging about 8 yards a catch, but here's where it gets dicey. He has 6 more rushes than Bucky Irving, and Bucky Irving has 90 more yards. Yeah. So Bucky Irving is running at a 6.2-yard average compared to a 2.1-yard average by Rachaad White, which is what I've always said about White. Mm-hmm. Where White has been running back 1 is because of his receiving.
for sure. And I think the problem you're having with Rashad right now is like I don't care which way he gets the points, is that he's just not getting you any. The last 2 weeks, 2.3, 3.5.
Yeah. And Bucky Irving is beginning to get mixed into the passing game.
Yeah.
He already has 7 targets. So not that far apart from what Rashad's got. And I think Tampa rides the hot hand. It's one thing that they do good is Godwin's, if he's looking good that game, they're feeding him. Same thing with the running backs. Bucky's a good runner.
I mean, if we're looking at his rushing totals, like you said, week 1, 15 attempts for 31 yards. Week 2, 10 attempts for 18. Week 3, 6 for 17. And that, he's buoyed a little bit because he had a 15-yard run.
That's right.
And a 9-yard run in those contests. So we're
That's right.
talking about, 5 rushes for 6 yards or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and comparatively speaking, you got a much like 9 rushes for 62 yards, 9 rushes for 70 yards, and then Bucky had a game where he was 7 for 22, but that was against Detroit, which actually has a pretty good
still better
rushing
than
defense.
anything that White has put on tape this year. And, I mean, the proof's in the pudding. He had 6 receptions week 1, 5 receptions week 2, 1 reception. 5 receptions week 3, 1 reception week 2. So I think his numbers are a bit skewed. If we average that out, we're looking at, 12? We're looking at 4 receptions a week.
Yep.
And that's just not viable because you drafted Rashad White as like an RB2, right? And, averaging 5 points a game is not going to get it done. No. I don't know that it gets better either.
I think
really
you
don't.
overpaid for Rashad White, and so maybe you can trade him to somebody right now because of his name and potential upside.
You're going to have to talk him up. You're going to have to wait for him to have a decent game.
Yeah, or else maybe you're adding in another player just kind of as a,
as a sweetener, as they would say.
Yeah.
All right, so from one guy who's underperforming to another guy who I think is in a bad situation. It's a terrible situation for this organization right now. And I feel like they have to make a move, honestly. They're in win now mode in the Miami Dolphins, and fantasy player basically of the year last season, NFL top 100 number 1. Although I disagree with that. Tyreek Hill is in a bad situation.
Yeah, he's getting a lot of targets, which is good, but that's Tariq. He's got 23 targets already, so you're probably talking about, 9, probably about 8 per game, which isn't terrible. 194 yards, but only 1 touchdown. He still is stretching the field at 14.9, but that is not what you expect. It's sad that is not what you're expecting out of Tyreek Hill.
Well, here's the thing with Hill. All right, I'm gonna pull up his game log right now because I was looking at it last night. But we're talking all his damage was done week 1 with Tua.
That's right. Yep.
12 targets in that game, 7 receptions, 130 yards, and his touchdown are all there.
Yep. And the
right?
scary
So,
the scary thing is, and now Skylar's hurt.
Skylar's hurt. I think they got to go out and get a veteran.
Yeah. Well, right now they've got Tim Boyle. He's the only quarterback on that roster. And
Watching Tim Boyle play quarterback is just like his name sounds.
Yeah.
It's painful.
Yeah.
It's going to explode at some point, and it probably smells pretty bad.
But who do you go get? If you're the
Go
Dolphins,
get Russell Wilson.
Yeah, or else, that's what you're hearing, or else you're hearing Bryce Young, which is crazy.
I would not get Bryce Young.
Yeah,
you got to go get
might be an upgrade over Tim Boyle.
It might be, but I think you got to get a professional quarterback. You have a team full of studs. You're supposed to be competing for that division. You got to send the flare gun up and save your season right now. And if you're a Tyreek Hill owner who's heavily vested like me, you're praying for them to bring somebody in because this is abysmal. I'm looking at 6 targets, 5 less targets in the next 2 games than the one game. And what's interesting is that in both the games against Buffalo and Seattle, the opposing team scored more than the opposing team in week 1, which would lead you to believe they had to throw the ball more,
right?
And he still received less targets.
Right.
So that is worrisome, super worrisome. Week 1 PPR, he scored 29 points. He was way, 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 way below that the other 2 weeks. I think he scored 7 and 6, total of 13 points.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's pretty clear. I don't know that I could bench Tyreek Hill this week. But if he puts up another, if they trot out another, a Tim Boyle, and he has another lackluster performance, you may have to consider it.
Yeah.
I don't know that I trade him because I think Miami has to do something.
Yeah, well, I think they do, and I think it's going to be interesting. I also think Tua could come back. I mean, Tua is saying he's coming back. I think it's going to be an extended period. They're going to really make sure that he's fine. But it's hard to give up on Tyreek.
Yeah, you can't. And I still think they have to make a move regardless because you need to stop the bleeding to stay in, shouting distance of these guys in your division. And you need insurance.
Yeah.
Because he could very easily get hurt again. I mean, it sucks. I was happy that he played the whole season last year. But, man, if you're Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, A-Chain, even though A-Chain's performing right now, if you're one of these guys' owners, you're hoping and praying that the Miami Dolphins go out there and make a move.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. So, from Tyreek Hill to another guy that we ballyhooed all offseason, Garrett Wilson.
And if I remember right, the big-headed one sitting in this seat said that he would be the number one receiver by the end of the year. So still time.
Still time.
But let's talk about Mr. Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, so I'm going to bring up the stats here, but here's what I will tell you. I looked at them last night while I was preparing for the show, and I do remember saying, well, he hasn't been terrible.
No.
But he has not been as advertised. And I feel that Rodgers is coming into form. So, let me jump ahead here. I'm not punting the ball on Garrett Wilson this season.
No.
But I will say that if you drafted him where he was going, you're probably hurting a little bit right now. I mean, we're talking about, this is non-PPR, but let me switch it to PPR. Say we're still talking the point total. His highest scoring game was this last one where they came into form at under 15 fantasy points. So he's getting you double-digit points, which is great if you drafted him, in the 5th or 6th round. But Garrett Wilson was, projected to be
I think he
kind
was
of
going,
that guy.
I mean, he was going probably at least within the top 10, in a lot of leagues, top 5.
Yeah, I think this could still turn around, but through 3 weeks, he hasn't really won you.
The only thing I'll say for him is, he passes the eye test.
Yes.
So he is getting open. He's learning a camaraderie with a new quarterback.
Yes.
Alan Lazard has that already.
I'm happy you pointed this out. Yes.
Yeah, because they've worked together before. But you can already see, he's gotten 26 targets.
Yeah.
Which is 10 more than Lazard. He is forcing the ball, and he's trying to figure out what type of ball does Garrett like. Does he like it over which shoulder?
Yeah.
They're learning each other. And this was a better week in that he did score, and he had another opportunity for a decent-sized pass that just got broken up by a good defensive play.
Yeah, I was going to say that the chemistry just doesn't seem to be there with them yet.
But it will get there.
But how long does it take? So if you're holding on, and here's my wide receiver one, you could still, if I had the mind to make a move, I can trade Garrett Wilson for a pretty decent haul right now.
Yeah.
Based on, because I do think he will be good. And you could probably, maybe there's a guy that's not desperate for him, we can make you a deal. But if you're counting on it, I don't know that. I mean, is next week going to be much better?
No.
Do you need it to be?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think that's if you're a team that's, hey, you had some tough breaks, started off 0-3, and you're maybe in a dynasty league, maybe you're considering trading him for the number one pick next year or a pick and a young player. But if you're competitive, I think you got to hang on to him because I do think it's going to rebound. I think somewhere around game 6 is where they're really going to start finding their mojo. And to be honest with you, it's the one thing I hate about today's NFL is that all of these teams, not all, but most of these teams are not starting their starters in the preseason, and they're not getting any kind of synergy, any kind of timing together. And I think it's really making these first couple games every year now almost unwatchable.
I don't know about unwatchable, but I think it's very hard to project. I don't really think, like I said in the open, you don't know what's real and what's not right now. I can tell you what's real, though, and it's about our next gentleman on the board. Our next gentleman is 34 years old. And I think it's cute that people want to attribute what's going on with him to his newly found love interest and his newly found podcast stardom, which can't say I'm not envious of. But Travis Kelce has not only looked not great, he looks like a shell of himself.
Okay. Is it that haircut?
I don't know if it's the haircut.
The haircut's pretty bad.
It could be the haircut.
Yeah.
But, man, I'm worried. I'm worried about Travis Kelce. Now, football, if we're talking about real-life football, I think he'll be able to strap it up in the big games and the playoffs. So, yeah, great. And like Mark said, you check out our clip on our TikTok. Guys on Pod, right? Is it Guys on Pod? Yes. Guys on Pod on TikTok. I clipped up Mark talking about Kelce and said, yeah, don't, come yell at me when he has like an 18-point game, but I don't think week to week you're getting the old Travis or the young Travis Kelce back. We're talking about 4 targets, 3 targets, 5 targets. He's been efficient with the targets, but it's all been very close to the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
It seems like Rashee Rice is really kind of being...
Rashee Rice has been everything that you wanted Tyreek Hill and Garrett Wilson to be. He's already at 300 yards, 2 touchdowns.
So do we know the Hollywood is on 6-week IR?
Yeah.
So it's another mouth to feed when he comes back. I think the age is catching up to them. Maybe they're trying to bring him along. So I don't know what they're doing.
I
don't know. I just know it doesn't look great.
Here's what I would say. He's got 8 receptions. He's got 70 yards. And if you threw a couple touchdowns, like normally by this point of the season, he's got 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
He's the number 1 tight end in the league.
Yes.
And nobody would be saying he's done. The reason is he's just not converting around the goal line. But if we're being fair, they're not scoring a ton of points right now.
That's fair, but I will push back and say, let's give him a touchdown in each of these contests.
Yeah.
And we're looking at 12.4 points, 7.6, and 13 points. Not, yes, decent tight end production.
Good enough for probably be number 1 tight end.
I don't know, man. You're drafting Travis, maybe this year, but Travis Kelce is a guy that up until where was he going this year? Like round 6, round 7?
Well, I think it depends on your league. I know that I traded for him.
I'll look at his ADP.
And I gave up a pretty good amount to get him because I felt like he had 1 more year. And I was wrong.
So overall, on RT Sports, he was going number 36. So that's firmly in the 3rd round, right?
Yeah.
He's going 25 on the sleeper app. Consensus is 28 overall TDs. He was still being drafted as tight end 1 and tight end 2. Overall, tight end 1. So what I'm saying is that, that 12 points, 9 points is not what you want there. And Laporta hasn't been much better, but I think projecting now, what do you think? Like I said, real football, I think he still could show up for you.
Yeah.
You have him best ball, great, all that jazz. But week to week, I'm going to find it hard to fire Kelce up if I have something viable to put there, like to start in front of him.
I agree, and I think fantasy, it's not looking good, and I think part of that because I don't think the Chiefs are looking like a team that's going to, they seem to be about a team that they're probably for sure 20 to 24 points a game. It doesn't look like they're Buffalo, where they've got the ability to just blow people out right now. They're banged up at running back, which I do think hurts him because
it does.
He does a lot of his damage around the line. They do a lot of play action, which right now no one's buying the run. So
that's fair.
Actually pulling another defender back into the coverage, and that's making it a little bit harder.
Okay, so from Travis Kelce to his tight end brethren, let me cut that off before it starts playing. Kyle Pitts. The notorious Kyle Pitts. Man, so through three weeks, we're looking at a total of 12 targets.
Yeah.
We're looking at 8 receptions. And, man, he has a quarterback. Now, they're struggling to throw the ball as well, but they've been okay. I think we're starting to find out that Kyle Pitts may just not be
right
a productive tight end.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, people were saying, oh, well, all the great ones, including Kelsey, took 3 or 4 years to show themselves. The difference is that Kyle, his best season is still his first season when he had a ton of yards, but almost, I think, no touchdowns.
Yeah.
He's competent this year, like 8 targets, 105 yards. He's got a touchdown. It's not horrible.
8 targets? Where are you getting 8 targets?
I'm sorry, not 8 targets.
I got 12.
Eight
receptions.
receptions.
8 receptions.
105 yards and a touchdown. It's not horrible.
It's horrible.
But it's not it's not where you drafted him, and it's not your expectations.
I mean, Pat Fryer moved, right? I mean,
right. Mike Gesicki, Brendan Strange, even in over a 2-game spurt has looked better.
Yeah.
So I think Pitts may never be the tight end that we thought he was going to be.
I think that's fair. I think you could say that and not really. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. We're going on year what?
4.
4?
Yeah. And unless it's a lot like the Browns, their timing's off. So maybe, Cousins coming back from the, ACL tear, never having worked with these guys. But, he seems like he's got some synergy with some of them. I mean,
that's fair. Yeah.
throwing 2 touchdowns to Drake London. And Pitts, most of his routes, I don't know, like Cousins does a good job of throwing the wide receiver open.
Yes, it's probably his strength.
Pitts doesn't seem to get it. Like, I think that there's a little bit of lack in route running with Pitts.
All right, so I think that about sums up the guys that there's more guys we're concerned about. We don't want to give everything away here, but is there anybody else that you kind of got on the tip of your tongue that you're maybe a little worried about, concerned?
Well, I think, and this is near and dear to my heart, I think you have to say, is Deshaun Watson ever going to return to anywhere close to the form of what he showed in last time he played, which was 2020? He does not seem like he is. He seems like he's lost a step. He's not seeing the field as well. And he's not a terrible quarterback, but he needed his speed and he needed his ability to get out of harm's way. And he just seems to be off.
All right. Anybody on waivers that you're looking to add?
Yeah. I'm going to start with 2 tight ends. Speaking of Travis Kelce, if you drafted Kelce or Pitts, you're probably looking around for a tight end. And there's 2 that I'm really high on. The first one is Mike Gesicki, our old favorite. Kind of found himself anew with Cincinnati. He's currently the number 6 tight end and averaging 9.3 points per game, which not a lot, but for a tight end, it's pretty good. And you're going to take that most games. And then the second one that I really like, he's only rostered in 23% of the leagues, and that is Zach Ertz, who right now is the number 9 tight end. He's averaging 8 points per game in a PPR league. And honestly, like watching him last night, not last night, but he's coming into his own. He kind of seems the antithesis of what Kelce. He doesn't seem old. He seems like he's got that step back. And he's always been a great route runner.
Okay.
Those are 2 that I would.
I didn't think you were going to go 2 in a row. But, all right, so I'm going to throw this out here. The 49ers are banged up, and the 49ers don't look exactly the same as they did last year. And somebody that really doesn't look the same is Brandon Ayuk. Ayuk looks like he's out of shape. He looks like he missed camp.
Yeah.
Looks like he didn't stay in shape. And Juwan Jennings put on a show. I don't think that's going to go. Listen, here's the thing. If you played sports or worked on a team in a workplace before, when the guy performs, it does not go unnoticed. People are human. Brock Purdy is a human being. Kyle Shanahan, they are people. They're watching that tape. Juwan Jennings is going to get more looks going forward. And if not just for the fact that Ayuk needs to work himself into shape, I think Juwan Jennings has showed that he can produce. I mean, I don't think they missed a beat. I think he might have looked better than Ayuk.
Yeah.
So I love Juwan Jennings. as at the very least a short-term pickup while Ayuk works himself into shape. I don't think you're gonna. I think you can start him and feel pretty good about it. And aside from that, I think by the time Ayuk's healthy, in shape, Debo's
Back.
full go, I think he will have carved out a spot for himself in this offense.
Yeah, and what I like about Jennings is 15.3 yard average, 3 touchdowns already. He seems to be that field stretcher. I agree with you. Mm-hmm. They can't be happy with Brandon Ayuk in San Francisco. They can't. And I don't think you look at like Brock Purdy, the kind of guy he is. He's the guy that has had to prove it every level, works his ass off. Mm-hmm. He probably doesn't respect a guy like Brandon Ayuk very much. And when Debo is fully healthy, I prefer Debo to Brandon Ayuk because he touches the ball more and in different ways.
That's fair. All right, so I'll highlight a running back for you, and it's going to be a guy I talked about in the preseason, Tyrone Tracy. Now, if you're just looking at the numbers, and they're not there yet. He was involved more this week, but I think there's 2 things to pay attention to. Is he's still working himself back from that injury, and Devin Singletary has looked good, but has also fumbled 2 weeks in a row. And they were both pretty impactful fumbles.
Yeah.
It has been the reason why Devin Singletary has not stuck anywhere as a number 1 back. He has the most fumbles, I think, since coming into the league. Lost fumbles as a running back. It's just something he struggles with. Can they correct it? Sure. But Tyrone Tracy is a guy that they went and drafted. They like Tyrone Tracy. He's a good blocker. He can play all 3 downs. He's a very instinctive runner. He catches the ball well. He has all the tools. I look to see him getting more looks, especially this week. If you need a flex player, a fill-in, I wouldn't hesitate to add Tracy. I think he's going to have a larger role than he's had the first 3 weeks on a short week playing Dallas at home. Look for Tyrone Tracy to have a little bit more of a share in the backfield there.
Yeah.
There's no sightings of Eric Gray at all. I'm not sure he has a carry.
Yeah, he does. I was just looking at the stats, but he's far behind the other 2. And what I love about
and Eric Gray fumbled as well, the opening kickoff.
And what I love about Tyrone Tracy is he's not that far away from the number of targets that Singletary's gotten. Singletary's gotten 10.
Yeah.
Tyrone's gotten 5, but he's averaging a yard more per reception. He looks more explosive, and I think he was a receiver. He was a converted receiver in college,
yes.
Which I think he is like the future of the Giants backfield.
I do too.
Okay, I have one quick guy. If you're in an incredibly deep league. Incredible. It's a guy that we talked about during the preseason. I was very high in him, and I think he's the future in this team, and that is Isaac Guerendo. He's only rostered in 3% of the leagues. He plays for San Francisco. He is CMC, but he's a developing CMC. CMC is officially now out for the year, I think, and researching surgeries. But Jordan Mason has looked good. But Jordan Mason's backup, Elijah Moore, got hurt, so he's out. And Guerendo, he's only had 5 attempts, but they all came last game for 19 yards. And they're seeming like they're starting to work him into the backfield. So one thing I love is the 49ers can run. Like, I don't care who's back there.
Yeah.
So he's basically one injury away from the starting running back in a team that moves the ball. So if you got a deep league and you're looking for, you're grasping, I would probably pick him up.
Okay. All right. Well, guys, that's the show. If you like what you heard, like we said, go to our Patreon and you can get more in-depth analysis, specific questions answered, all that good stuff. If you like our faces, check us out on all your socials at GON Podcast. You could also find us on, that includes TikTok, Instagram. We're not really on X, right?
Yep.
We're on X.
We're on, but we're not on.
We're on, but we're not on. Check out our TikTok. We're really active there and on Instagram. We look forward to hearing from you guys. Like and subscribe. Wonderlick the notification bell so you get notifications every time we post. And let us know what you think in the comments. We love you.
Peace.
Peace.